Remember Chico Marx?
Yeah.
Used to do that.
Remember,
He just
remember you used to call what you used to call Squeedo?
Guido.
Squeedo, yeah.
Yeah,
And we would
still
launch into
Guido.
Squeedo.
Squee.
So this was an amazing time. You were arguably the most successful producer songwriter in the music business at that point, or one of a handful, if I want to spread it out a little bit.
Yeah,
And
I,
you
I think there was a few people making records that were lucky.
you felt a burning desire after some sustained work at that level to do your own artist project, correct?
Yeah, Burning Desire is one way. I had made, I think at that point I had made four Madonna records and said, after Like a Prayer came out, and he said, "You made Warner Brothers about a $500 million this year. What would you like?" I just said, "I just want to make a record." And he said, "Do whatever you want." So that's what we did. That's what we did. We did whatever we wanted.
Well, lucky us because we got to do it with you. The outro to Like a Prayer still lights me up. I mean, Guy Pratt. I mean, that's
Yeah.
Guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's Guy, all right. And what we did was he came up with this in his thing, and then I went over at that point and doubled it with the Mini Moog. That was the rest of the bass line in the song was the Mini Moog sound, and I just doubled his part at the end, and because we could. I met Guy on a record I produced for Brian Ferry called Bête Noire. And he said, "I have this great bass player." And so over came Guy with his hair was long. And my favorite anecdote about Guy playing bass on Bête Noire was there was a bass part that we couldn't use where we were mixing because it was just too wild. And you can imagine this happening, right? It just didn't lay there. It was too all over the place. And Brian Ferry insisted that we could use it because of how amazing Guy looked while he was playing it. For real. For real. Like, no, it has to be good. He looked so amazing while he was playing it. But it wasn't amazing. It was Guy on a bad day. Or on an overly enthusiastic day. I don't think Guy's ever had a bad day. I think he was over enthusiastic.
I don't think so either. And I was afraid, I was lucky enough to speak to him yesterday, and I was afraid to broach the subject of his general state of mind and body during the record that we did. And he brought it up immediately. He brought it up
Yeah.
immediately, front and center. He said, "Man, I was hungover most of the time." And I remembered us prying him out of his apartment, or somebody prying him out of his apartment at 3 in the afternoon. We'd been waiting for
Yeah.
him, and he showed up and sat down and played the most amazing bass part I had ever heard.
I remember playing the stuff, and I think it was fun. I remember it being fun. And I remember it being tricky too, because the lyric thing got difficult in places. Um, it was fun, but sometimes it was, it felt rough to get lyrics. I remember that. Um,
Some of the artists you work with were probably pretty instinctive about just coming up with lyrics immediately, right?
somewhere. I mean, yeah, somewhere it was real torture, but some were good. And I mean, some of those things, some of the songs, I already sort of knew what I wanted them to be about, like "Turn It On Salvador" and "We Always Come Home" and "There Was a Little Boy." I mean, these were stories of things that, I already had an idea of what they were. Um, and so we had a place to start, and we worked through the story. I mean, do you remember? Well, I think it's actually on that one issue of the record, the first version of "There Was a Little Boy," which was the sort of,
Yeah.
I don't know what band would sound like that. We were sort of a fusion. What band is that? Was it? I liked that version. My prog nerd was like so present with that, it really was.
Well, it was a point of change in music, and I feel like the band was actually ahead of the curve, and that was probably part of your instinct. I mean, in my particular situation, I know one of the reasons you chose me is because I was a less slick choice than, I mean, you were working with all the best guitar players, in LA. And I remember I came in and I was pretty rough around the edges, and I did not, for whatever reason, bring a rack. I was either told not to, or I just was fed up with my rack too. And I think you were pretty fed up with the slick guitar sound at that point.
Guitar players to go unnamed. I had all these stuff, and I'd say, "Can I just hear it dry?" And say, "Sure." And I'd say, "But there's some chorusing. Could you just dry?" Okay. There's still a little reverb. Dry. And it was like, 5 stages of dry. It was the Bradshaw thing, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
And my favorite thing was David Williams got one because he felt he needed one. And he would just press foot switches and nothing ever changed because his fingers were like cigars. And so it didn't matter what you put on it. The fingers were bigger than the plug-in, or not the plug-in, the effect. And he'd go, "Just a minute," he'd do all this stuff. Say, "David, it sounds exactly the same. Just unplug the thing," and it's like beautiful stuff. Yeah.
Was Last Plane Out actually a theme that you came in with, or did you guys come up with that basic concept?
Yeah, I think Kevin kind of came up with that lyric idea. Although there were lines in there. I mean, I think we worked out the lyric as that unit, and there were lines that were like from a Steve Martin routine. The Dogs and Valvoline was from a Steve Martin routine that I'd seen on television or something, and there was all these different things that were thrown in there, and but I think the idea of the Last Plane Out thing was Kevin, and Greetings from Sodom. Sodom was Kevin, which is a pretty good opening line. I've heard worse.
And it's a shame that he left us so early. He should have stayed around.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. We were actually talking about doing another project, just at that time, when that happened.
I mean, what a wonderful thing. I didn't know that, and that makes me feel so great that you guys had maybe just realized how valuable your relationship was, and the thing was, and you were thinking about doing it again. Well, he was precocious, though, correct?
Yeah, he was difficult. Yeah, but I mean, who wasn't? Yeah. So I'm difficult. The concept, or the precept of the thing was so it was so imbalanced in terms of where we were all coming from, because I had this big studio and all this stuff, and it was like my money and my studio, and so I think there was a certain. I mean, look, we made a crazy good record, so whatever we did worked. And oftentimes in these things, the tension is what makes it interesting. And wherever the tension was coming from is almost irrelevant. It doesn't matter. But it was there. It was definitely there. And so, and I don't know if it was about value, or if it was just about curiosity, or if it was just about what have you done since that was this good. And I don't think I've ever done anything any better than that, In fact, I know I haven't. So
me either. And I was surprised that when Guy Pratt said the same thing to me spontaneously, because it's something I knew at the time. I even said it. I was at a Mexican restaurant for some reason on one of those evenings or something with Kevin and Brian McLeod. I don't think you were there. And I said to both of them, this is going to be one of the best things we ever do. And I knew it at the time. And it indeed, in some ways, was the best thing I ever did musically, artistically. That was, I certainly got to work with some really great artists. And no one more than you got to work and write songs with artists. But musically, best thing we ever did. Yeah.
I mean, you had mentioned Queen of Misery, that we played that. At that time, we were playing with machines a lot, and so you sort of had that thing where you weren't trying to sound like a machine, but you were trying to groove in a rigid thing. And so if there's a click, and I'm sure there was a click, there was definitely a click,
I knew at the time, here you were, that one of this, small handful of producers in LA, and you chose him to produce the record. And I remember at the time being very impressed by the fact that you would purposely remove yourself from the room and let him do his work.
What people have talked about and brought things up, and I've as you know, I'm not shy. I'll differ if I don't disagree. It was not a vanity project. It wasn't. It was not meant to be a vanity project. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to be in the artist chair more than anything. I mean, maybe you've heard me say this before, but I never wanted to be Quincy Jones. I wanted to be Keith Emerson. I don't know how the fuck I ended up producing all those records. It really wasn't what mattered to me. And it still isn't to this day. You know what I mean? I still play the piano all day. I'm not trying to, I don't know. I don't study people's work. I never did. So it was the thing about trying to be a keyboard player and in a band with people that I thought were really great and playing together and doing something with all of this stuff that we had around us that had freedom in it. And so I didn't want to be sitting in that chair. I didn't want to be telling you what to play. I want to be having a glass of wine and being an artist, you know what I mean? And going, I don't feel like playing tonight. And I remember those moments of really feeling that, of actually feeling like, I'm here in this band and Bill's got this. And I think it was important that I did that. And after we'd done Like a Prayer, I mean, I saw his sensibilities. I saw how he worked. I mean, in my career, the next best sounding record to Toy Matinee is Like a Prayer. That record sounds unreal. And it's Bill, he recorded it and he mixed it in the days when that's how it was done. And I don't know how it could ever be done any other way, but things have changed. So, I know I didn't answer your question. I just babbled, but that's the significance of it. I didn't want to produce it,
I remember when I played the bridge to Things She Said, it was so on top of it. I said to Bill, that's really on top. Can I do it again? And he said, no. So then he put it through a Roland SDE 3000 and delayed it by 20 milliseconds. And it was perfect. I mean, you do realize that there are musicians who ask about this constantly, and we did it. It was so long ago, and people still ask about it constantly. Do you still have people asking you about it?
I have no idea what any of this looks like to anybody else, and I don't think about it. When I do think about it, I feel weird about it. I don't mean Toy Matinee, I mean all of it. This was a period in my life. It was about almost 17 years, and I made friggin' Roger Waters records. I mean, I did stuff that was like, well, how do you do this thing? So many different things. And I don't really know how. I don't. But there it was, and it happened. All that stuff happened. And now it's like it never did. Except we talk about Toy Matinee, and every once in a while I'll hear Like a Prayer in the grocery store. I mean, I always say the same thing, and it's a title of an old Moody Blues album that I really liked when I was a kid. But when people say, what are you doing? I say, I'm in search of the lost chord. And that's what I've always been doing. I'm still studying all the time. And it's just because I love music and I love playing with music and I love exploring music. And I've actually found that the more I pay attention to any pop culture at all, the less I feel like going on this weird journey of like, I'm just looking for new notes and practicing the piano, And I think more, you can't escape what turned you on when you were an adolescent. You can't escape it. And so that the stuff that turned me on when I was that age, going to see concerts. I mean, the first concert I went to was in '68. Somebody's mother drove us because I was in some band, and it was Led Zeppelin, Jethro Tull, Savoy Brown, and The Litter in one night. And we just stayed until somebody got on the phone and called somebody's mom to come get us, And like it's 1968, so I was 12. You know what I mean? 12. And so from there, if you're a musician and you're into this stuff, and by that time I had heard the first Jethro Tull record and listened to the first Led Zeppelin album with my band buddies, and had learned Boré, which was the instrumental piece off of Stand Up, da doo dee da da da, and I'd learned the bass line and I'd learned the solo and I'd learned it all. And so I was like, what can I see next that makes me want to go further? And that's what we all did, right? I mean, did anybody do this any differently? I don't think so. That's it. You hear that, you hear Jeff Beck make a guitar noise and you go, I must know how that happens. Where does that come from? And then the trip is for me, and this is not completely off topic, but I spent a lot of time playing with Jeff.
Dude, I have a story about that because you had me play rhythm on some of those tracks.
It was the Jeff Beck model, and it was in a box.
Oh, okay,
we saw him pull up and lift the trunk up on this jalopy that he'd made, and he pulled out a cardboard box and stripped the plastic off it and walked in with a guitar and a rat pedal in his pocket, never tuned it, that we saw, never, okay, and said, you got an amp. And Roger had a twin reverb, and he plugged the rat pedal into it, and we still don't remember him tuning. And he had black paint all over his hands from cars, and he commenced to be Jeff Beck. And then at the end of one of those days, Roger picked up the guitar and strummed it, and it's so out of tune you couldn't believe it. And when you watch him, he just pulls it into tune when he's playing it. It's like, where are you from, dude? When I was very little, I started just making stuff up. I mean, really little. And so by the time I was 5, I was taking piano lessons. I could already play. I started playing when I was just a little over 3. And my sister was teaching me things, and she was a classical musician. And my dad was a sax player and a jazz musician, and the whole family all the relatives would come over and play. So it was that thing where it was pretty natural to do. But what my dad would do when the piano teachers would come, they'd often just say, could you just play for me? And he's up on the stairs. They don't see him. And so I'm 6 or 7 years old, and I go, sure. And I just improvise stuff. And then he would follow them outside, and the next week there'd be a different teacher. And he would basically say to them, you're not here to be entertained by my kid. Like, you're here to teach him. And that's what they would literally do it, man. And I remember they'd say, could you just play? Because they didn't understand what this was, this improvisational thing. And I don't know what it is either, except I've always been very resistant to structured things. So the passion to do this is all there's ever been. And then, when people start paying you a bunch of money and you have records that end up hit records, I mean, the first hit record I had was Live to Tell, and it was the biggest of the hit records. And it was an 8-track Tascam that I did in the house. And so was the vocal. So was the track. I'm using a foot pedal to start the drums, and I'm playing the bass and the right hand on the keyboard at the same time. And it's on 4 tracks of an 8-track, and she sang on it, and then we overdubbed on it. But that's all it was, and that became a big hit. Wow. So I felt like, I think I felt possessive about the notion that this needs to remain as organic and natural as it can, because that's what you respond to, is the innocence of it.
I was living the dream. I was living up in the camp. That's why I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? I mean, I love that movie. It's such a great love letter. But I literally lived there. Lochello Drive, I was 100 yards away from where Leo lives and where the Manson house was. No, I'd had this crazy period where I'd finished the Floyd tour in the end of August. And then I'd been back to LA like 3 times. I'd come over to do the Madonna album for Pat, and gone home, then come back to do another album. Then I'd come. So I was just coming to LA all the time.
Got it.
I went home, and I remember, there was Christmas and New Year, and there was nothing happening. And Pat and I had been talking about this band project. And I just called him up and said, I'm really bored and I hate it here. Can we just do this now, please? And he had me on a plane within 10 days. But, funny enough, I have literally in this room, my little music room at home, I actually have pretty much all the basses I played on that album here in the room.
Can you show me one of them?
Yeah. This is the Spectre. This is anything with an octave pedal on it is this.
And that's really, those are some of the most amazing sounds. I'm kind of in disbelief still to this day at the bass sound on Last Plane Out. It's
I
Yeah.
am that and Queen of Misery, and that's Bottrell. That's Bottrell. He does something, I don't know. And he had that box, the Bottralizer, which was some weird compressor, but it wasn't it was a compressor, but it only compressed the mid-range or something like that, and it just sounded wicked. Yeah, in fact, I've got the music mat. This is the one I played on Queen of Misery and Ballad of Jenny Leitch.
awesome.
Yeah, you on that are insane. Insane. That's one of the finest fucking solo. You know, Steely Dan would kill to have had that on one of their records.
Thank you. I can hear him like turning up the parts he likes, and then gratefully, thankfully, he's turning down a couple of parts that are so busy and so irreverent and inappropriate to the vocal that I listened to him. I really played that under where a guy was going to sing. Yeah, I remember we would work 2 or 3 days on one song occasionally, and it really got honed and really, really beautifully arranged.
Well, I mean, I think Last Plane Out, I think, you know, that was the first song we worked on, and that went through all sorts of iterations. And I think it was like one of the last ones that we actually put down. So, you know, and I was there from February till April. So that's like 3 months.
Yeah, it was about 3 months. Yeah. And I remember there was one moment where the band actually kind of disintegrated in the middle of the project. I don't know if you were there for that, but
I left. That's why I'm not on the last. I'm not on. There Was a Little Boy.
Right.
It's pretty annoying because since I've been doing my lockdown licks, loads of people say, "Could you do lockdown?" Like, no, because I've never played it.
But the funny thing is with this project is that, ironically, is how I get more kudos from this from American musicians than anything else I've done. In Britain, it's pretty much unknown, but in America, it's not. You know, I met guys who work with Dre, I met Beck's band and everything, and they're all of them, and like fuck Pink Floyd. It's like, whoa, Toy Matinee, dude, you know. So. And I love that.
I mean,
it's like it's the nearest thing. It's the nearest thing I've got to. It's like it's my Velvet Underground record. You know what I mean? That thing only 300 people bought it, but they all started a band.
I actually have this impression, and you can check me on this, that I know in America, it seemed for years, I kept hearing that sound engineers, like mixing engineers on the road, would use the record to actually test systems in theaters and concert halls. And then they would also actually use the record to play while the audience filtered in at big venues for like big artists. Did you ever hear any of that?
I didn't hear about that. I did hear about people checking for sound. I also have a friend who's now a very successful screenwriter who back then was actually working in a really high-end stereo shop in LA. And he said that was the absolute album for selling anyone a stereo. The thing that Bill Bottrell always used to say, do you want people to be able to date your record by the snare reverb?
I know that Nirvana showed up in 1993, and that's when I actually got really, really busy because I was the guy who could sound like the guy in the band. And it's exactly what you're talking about. Everything became less polished. So in that way, Toy Matinee was kind of ahead of its time.
Yeah, I would say that.
Because Pat was very interested. The reason I got hired is because I didn't sound as slick as all the other guys. He could have brought in any guitar player he wanted.
I would have had a lot to do with that, by the way.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I didn't want, because I always, because my whole thing is I'm the English kid. And I thought, that I was meant to bring my somewhat punky sensibility to it, I think that's what Pat wanted, because that's where I come from, that whole.
It was like a combination of like the Beatles and Jethro Tull and prog rock.
Exactly. And there was some psychedelia in there.
Yeah.
I remember actually, because I remember playing Bill an album that he really liked, which was actually it was an XTC side project. It was called The Dukes of Stratosphere, and they actually had an album called What Time Is Love, and I remember playing it in the studio, and it was brilliant, full on kind of Syd Barrett whimsy kind of, and everyone was like, yeah, no, this is where we're at, And I mean, it's funny because then I get asked to go to schools and speak and ask, people about careers in music, and I just say I don't know. I don't, because I don't know what the music business is now. I don't know how it works. I don't understand the model, and certainly my career doesn't exist now. No one can have you can't have the career that I had, which is basically just. I didn't. Career isn't something I had. It's something I did. I just careered madly from one thing to the other. Bounced off walls and found myself here and found myself there. And that ain't there now. You've got to be you've got to be a grown-up professional. So,
I had known Kevin for quite a while in the Bay Area music scene. We traveled in the same circles, and he actually flew to New York with my band and did some shows, sat in with us, and he was just a good friend. And he called me up one day while I was living in Berkeley, and he said, "Hey, Brian, I got offered this project, and it's this producer, Pat Leonard, and I would love it if you could do it, but he's really interested in having Terry Bozzio do this record. And I know you know Terry, so do you have his number?" And I said, "Sure, man." And he goes, and he was really apologetic, like, "I wish it was you," right? So what happens is Pat calls up Terry Bozzio. Terry Bozzio goes, "I'm not available for that, but I know this guy up in Berkeley named Kurt Wortman. Kurt Wortman lived in my apartment building in Berkeley. And he and I were friends. And he thought, oh, join a band in LA? I don't think so. But I know this guy named Brian McLeod." So my name came up a couple of times. So then Pat was like, "Well, this just makes sense to fly him down." Now, when I flew down, at that point, I was teaching drums. I shared a studio with Les Claypool from Primus. It was kind of before Primus exploded. And I taught drums during the day, and those guys rehearsed at night. And I jam with Les sometimes. And so when I flew down, I had no expectations. I was like, this is just too crazy. And I was pretty comfortable with my little life, playing live in San Francisco and teaching drums, and everything was cool. And when I came down to play, there's certain things I really remember. Like, I remember he was like, "I love the way you play. You have a really good feel to the click, and we're going to start this thing," and boom, boom, boom. And then he hands me, and Guy was there, and we hit it off, and we were laughing. And he hands me like a 40-year-old reserve cognac, and he goes, we just finished mixing this, check it out. And he cranks up Like a Prayer at full volume. And I'm sitting there with this cognac, and it was life-changing. It was like, wow, it was a paradigm shift for me, because I really thought I wasn't going to get it. And there I was with you guys. I mean, you guys are all amazing players, and I just couldn't believe it. And I think I was ready for the challenge. It was good. Oh, and then the irony of that was, after I came down to LA, Les Claypool called me. He's like, "Hey, Brian, would you be interested in joining Primus?" And this was before they blew up. And I was like, "Oh, Les, I would love to, but I committed to this project." Well, I don't really think I was the right guy for that gig. As much as I love Les and I love the band, I don't really think that was for me. And I love those guys, but I think I made the right decision at that time of my life. And it was just such a pleasure playing with you guys. And I got to say, one of the things I remember, because all of you guys were, at the top of your game at the time. And I kind of felt like the outsider, but it kind of made me be a little more competitive and want to play harder. It kind of set the bar high. And one thing I really remember is all of you guys have amazing rhythm. It was about doing music that was good. And I really liked the lyrics, the lyrical approach, a little cynicism in the lyrics. just, very intelligent pop music. Ended up hanging out with Bill a lot, and he built a studio in Pasadena and called Toad Hall. Beautiful room, a beautiful place to hang out, and it kind of became a clubhouse. I really missed that. It was kind of a clubhouse, and he came up with the idea to have this thing, the Tuesday Night Music Club, where we would come down every Tuesday night with no really objective. Like we would pick a topic that was in the news and say, let's write a song about this, or somebody would have an idea, and we would just jam and write, and we had a great time. And that's all it was. It was a fun experience to just go play with your friends. And I met, David Bearwald, Dan Schwartz, David Ricketts. And then Kevin brought down his girlfriend. And she had done a tour with Toy Matinee as the keyboard player, and she got a record deal with A&M, and she turned in a record that I'm not sure about I don't know the exact details, but I think
Brian, I played all the guitars on that record. It was it was with Hugh Padgham. It was Sheryl Crow's first record with A&M.
Right.
Yeah, it was awesome, but they didn't want to release it, and she didn't end up liking it, and there you go.
Yeah, so Kevin said, "Can I bring my girlfriend down? She's kind of bummed out." We were like, "Sure, bring her down." And she was like one of the boys. She fit right in, total tomboy, great player, could play multi-instruments, and sing. And so she was singing on a bunch of stuff. And I don't know if she played the stuff for her A&R man, but somehow it leaked to A&M, and they were like, "This is good. Keep doing this." Your style, my style of drumming, everybody is integral in Toy Matinee. If we just sit in a room and jam, it sounds like Toy Matinee. It's just natural. We're just doing what we naturally do. And that was the magic, the chemistry of that, Yeah. I learned a lot. I was sitting at the bar. It was at a private club called Fred's, and it was Pino Palladino's birthday party. And Guy invited me, and I couldn't find Guy. He's partying. So I go sit at the bar, and I look over, and it was David Gilmour and his wife sitting at the bar right next to me. And I go, "Would you like some champagne?" And he goes, "Sure," because I had a bottle of champagne. So I asked the waiter for 2 glasses of champagne. They brought 2 glasses. I filled up his and hers. We started talking. He passed me a joint in the club. I smoked a joint with him, and we talked about Captain Beefheart. But yeah, I regret that we didn't get to play live, because I don't think it's one of these kind of bands where we would have had to rehearse endlessly.
No,
we just played like that. That's how we sounded. You put these guys in the room, and that's how it sounds. And people like it. They liked it. They still like it.
They do. Do you get a lot of people asking you about it from time to time?
Yeah, I was doing a session at Blackbird, and what was it? Was it Little Boy or was it Toy Matinee? It was Toy Matinee, right? That I think Pat stormed out, and I think I looked at Kevin, and we were like, "I guess this is it. I guess we're done." But it was just a band moment, It's like, of course, if you don't have those moments, you're not going to make a great record. Some strife and struggle and strife and laughter and love and frustration, all that stuff, it makes for great records.
Looking at the overall band, was there anything unusual about the mix of people? You produced bands before, you'd been in bands before. I'm sure you probably enjoyed the kind of virtuoso musicality of Kevin and Pat.
And you.
Oh, thank you. It was you. You kind of saved me from myself in some ways because I've been listening to the record a lot. I even play along with it, and in the actual video I'm going to do, I play along with some of the parts. And there are clean tones that are really great, and they don't sound dated in any way because that's just kind of who you were. The stuff you would ask for was pretty unadorned.
Well, it was
And
lines, right?
yeah, right. Yeah.
Lines are forever.
Yeah. One of the reasons I was always successful as a musician is because I always had a lot of empathy for everybody I was working with. So in any situation, I could kind of go, "Oh, this person needs this
Mhm.
really badly, and I got to provide this." And you know, it was always hard.
Yeah.
So now I'm looking back at the ambitions and the hopes and dreams of all of us.
A way out.
Yeah,
It's something you could do.
yeah, right.
Some value you could bring that was available to us and was appreciated by the world at large. And if you cared enough, you know, if you had the heart, you could make it work for you, and you could get out of La Crescenta, California. You know.
Oh, that's so well put because I dreamed in Albuquerque of coming to California and I only had 2 years of private guitar lessons. I had basically every room I went into with the guys you used to work with, like Greg Filling-Gaines and, you know, all these people who were highly schooled musicians. I had no schooling and I could coexist, but I always felt that I had, you know, I suppose I felt like an imposter, but because of perseverance and ambition and just this pure desire and just trying to be of service to people, I had a great career that actually started after that. You know, my studio career started really in full at that moment and went, you know, that's where it all started for me. The 90s were the biggest chapter of my studio career. So,
Well, you said, well, you brought up, say, you know, as an example, Greg Filling-Gaines. I don't know about Greg's education, right? But I worked with him a lot. I had no idea he had education, music education. Fingers, man, that's what he had.
Right.
And that's what
Right.
you have.
Yeah.
You have fingers and touch, you know. That's what Greg has. It's me. You guys are right from the same zone.
No, thank you. Thank you. One of the things I will say about the music business back then is that if you did a particular project, it would often lead to a pretty amazing ancillary stuff. I mean, would you say that Pat is the reason that you met Kevin Gilbert and Brian
Absolutely.
McLeod?
Yeah.
And then when I look at what happened after that and the lives that were changed and the music that was made by you and those guys, but I get a real sense from you that you were seriously proud of it and you took us very seriously and
seriously proud of it.
Yeah.
See, it was the second album I produced.
Oh.
Officially. Yeah.
Wow.
You know, there was Thomas Dolby.
Oh, yeah.
And then Madonna heard Thomas Dolby's album and asked me to engineer through Pat, and did Madonna's album. And then immediately Pat said, I'm going to do this project, Toy Matinee. And well, I you know, I had learned a lot. I wanted to apply it, you know, and I was very proud of judging the content, you know, and bringing content to that. That's why I sort of, when people talk about the sound, I'm like, yeah, but you know, there was a lot else in there, you know. I was learning that anything goes, and you gotta go for shit, you know, and make it better. And I just, you know, I enjoyed the whole thing in terms of my growth and applying what I thought I could, you know. And yeah, I could have listened to it on the last day of mixing. I could have listened to it at mastering, and I could have listened to it a year later and gone, this shit's great. I'm sorry, whatever box it got put in, or, you know, I don't. I was not heartbroken about the commercial success of it. I just thought it was great, you know. And look who I met.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I guess that's really it for me too. It actually opened my world up musically to so many different new people, and you were one of them. And it actually was the start of a kind of a dream I had to be a session player, and I went after it like crazy after that, and it kind of gave me the confidence. It was a very prestigious thing for me, in addition to being something that everybody talks about this, everybody says this. I knew at the time that it would be one of the greatest things I would ever do, and indeed it has remained that. You made real. Am I right?
Yes, it was a confident, just like you say, confidence booster for me too. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm starting to sense a process here that is a higher art than the average producer with a gig. And I'm starting to learn this process, and I'm going to apply it. And with the juice I had, didn't have to talk to any record people. I took projects with the artists or found the artists, and said no to the record people, and you did that process, carried it out several times, or maybe for the rest of my career. So yeah, and the part of the juice came from putting that into practice on Toy Matinee.
I guess at the time I didn't realize that you were just at the beginning of your producing career, and that Thomas Dolby record was really, really well regarded. So I remember.
Yeah.
That.
Thomas Dolby and Toy Matinee, apparently the messages I kept getting from people for the next 10 years was, those are the studio back shelf album, top studio back shelf albums. Like,
why was this record so good in comparison to everything else out there?
Well, it was either the last album of the 80s or the first album of the 90s, or both. In spirit, in novelty, it sounds different. It doesn't sound like whatever was going on. The struggle of it,
yes,
the struggle is in every groove on there.
Yeah.
And the contributions fit together.
It's a concept that shouldn't have worked, because many super bands were put together and they generally sound like what they are, which is just, a fabrication. And you, I know, who tell the truth, just told me that you were shocked at how this was not that. This was actually a band right away. And Brian McLeod said the same thing, really. Mm-hmm. He did.